I got this from Amazon today. It's a PCIe Express card. You can basically plug it into your motherboard in a PCI slot, which is basically your GPU slot if you have a second one, which you probably do. And I thought this would be a neat thing to try. So it's got a heat sink on it, so hopefully it stays nice and cool. And because it's a PCI rather than an external enclosure, you should get pretty good speeds overall. My question is, how is the performance going to be on this versus plugging these NVMe's directly into the motherboard? So I'm going to take these two different NVMe's here. I'm going to test them plugged into the motherboard itself, check the speeds, and then also temperatures is going to be a big one for me. So do both of those, run them for a while. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them both out and put them into the Sabrent enclosure here, and I'll do a test. So there's two drives I'm going to be testing. This is a 970 Evo Plus, which is kind of the upper stack for Gen 3 drives. This should get around 3,500 megabytes a second read and writes, more or less. And then I have a Gen 4 drive, an SN770. This one here gets around 5,000 or 5,500 when plugged directly into the motherboard, thereabouts. So I want to see the difference there. So that's the item there. And it's a pretty big, nice big heatsink on it. Probably is going to be, in theory, similar to what my system has in terms of the heat, I would guess, but let's see here. Yeah, so it looks like we take the whole back off here. Okay. A little weirdly designed, but that's fine. Just a big, oh, there's, I think, yeah, you get 3 different sizes of thermal pad. You almost have to screw it to the bottom here. I don't know, I understand. The picture is wrong for what it wants you to do. It wants you to like just somehow magically have the NVMe in that little bracket there, which is right here. But you can't do that when it's out. So you have to almost take it out like that from the bottom. See that? So that you can loosen it. Then you put the NVMe drive in. Like so. And then this is kind of loose. You can see that. Then you can angle it like that and snap it in. Very poorly designed. Actually, it's not poorly designed. The picture is wrong. So that's not what you do. You don't put a screw in the top. Okay, so now you're basically going to stick it in here. And you're going to want like that. But the thing is, you're going to want to make contact with the actual metal there. So you're going to need thermal pads. So we'll stick one in to start. I don't know how, this is probably not, the world's greatest thermal pad, but it should be fine. I'm actually going to test this. I'm going to put this in and just see if it makes marks. And then we'll know if it's making contact. That's probably the max. That's the biggest thermal pad. I don't think you're going to be able to use more than that. Let's take that off. Yeah, so this is making contact. I don't know if you can see that. The big one's making contact. You can see where the screw was. Here we go. So it's going to have extremely good contact with the thermal pad, I guess. So we're all there, all done. And so that's the first drive. So this is where it goes here. You can see I have my ARC GPU there. And obviously my power is off. And you're basically going to stick it in just like a GPU would go in. Sorry, it's a little dark. Get that nice little click, and it's in. And we're plugged in there with the PCIe card, and it popped up right away. It has that little lock because it's actually from my laptop. But yeah, it's totally fine. Let's test it out. Okay, and here are our results. So if we first look at the SN770 here, this is the motherboard itself. So you can see here what our writes are, 52, 48, 47, 50, 45, etc., whatever. And then you can see over here, we're getting up to about 4.5-ish, 4.2 or so in that kind of range. If we look at the enclosure down here, it's a little bit slower, just a tiny little bit slower, not a lot. So, 52 to 50, 48 to 47. So we're losing, I don't know, a couple hundred megabytes a second, not that much. And then these over here have gone down a tiny little bit as well, a couple hundred megabytes, but not really making a big difference whatsoever. That's fine. And then if we get the temperatures here, this is in the motherboard right here. And you can see we actually got up to 57 degrees as a peak. And then if we look down here, this is the enclosure. So it's actually cooler. So we went down by 7 degrees, which makes sense. It's further away from the motherboard. There's a lot more metal. So the enclosure actually appears to be quite a bit cooler here, which is really nice. So you're actually getting lower temperatures and you're actually getting only a little bit of a drop in speed. Not a big deal. That's the Gen 4 drive. Over here we have our Gen 3 drive here.
So we have 3200, 29, and then if you look down here within a margin of error, they're identical. So what that tells me there is this is more or less the peak of the enclosure right here, around 5,000 megabytes a second. So 5 gigabytes a second is the approximate peak of the enclosure you can see there. And I say that because you can see here there's really no difference between the motherboard and the enclosure. They're essentially identical within a margin of error. So clearly that's not going to make any difference. So a Gen 3 drive, you just basically throw it in, whatever the fastest you can get. And then you can look at the temperatures on the Gen 3, and again, they went down. So it looks like on the motherboard versus the enclosure, you're losing about 5-6 degrees, and they're basically the same. So this is 57 down to 50, 56 down to 51. So it is actually dropping the temperatures a fair bit, around 6 or 7 degrees in both cases. And the biggest thing here is that you're able to sustain what I would call a mid-range Gen 4 drive, 5,000 megabytes a second, which is pretty good. These are good drives. If you get a 980 Pro from Samsung or something like that gets 7,000, 8,000 megabytes a second, you're going to be capped at these speeds right here. I'm actually really impressed with these results here. You can see here it's working quite well, and it's a really, really good drive, to be honest.